independent institutions. And they do so on a number of occasions. Our history in this country is replete with examples of PNM interference and attacks on independent institutions, their flagrant disregard for the rule of law and the constitution within Trinidad and Tobago, and the separation of powers within this country. I want to remind the public that this particular administration, just not more than maybe a year or 2 years ago, would have been embroiled in an issue as it pertains to the Police Service Commission, which is a body that would have been created by the Constitution under Section 122 and has the relevant protection offered to it based upon its creation by the Constitution. I want to remind the public that based upon that issue between this particular administration and the Police Service Commission imbroglio, we were left for the very first time within this country's history without a substantive police commissioner at the helm of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. That what would have transpired over a series of weeks would have been constant emails and missives coming out of the Police Service Commission dealing with the level of interference with respect to the creation of the list, and then that list passage to Parliament, and the interference and interception of that list on its way to Parliament at President's House, no less. And then we were greeted with a revelation by the Prime Minister of this country, the head of the National Security Council, indicating to this country lucidly that he was that high-ranking government official that interfered and intercepted that list at President's House. That is the level of disrespect, contempt that is meted out by this particular administration as it pertains to independent institutions. That is the propensity of the PNM as it pertains to them treating and interfacing with independent institutions. And now you have this issue now being played out within the public domain with respect to the DPP and the Prime Minister and the PNM administration as a whole. That the DPP's office is also constitutionally created under Section 90 of our Constitution, and it is created as an independent office with a role responsible for prosecutions within this country. And this is not the first time, I want to remind Trinidad and Tobago that this is not the first time that we would have seen such levels of bold-facedness and contemptuous behavior being meted out by a PNM administration to the Director of Public Prosecution and that office. Let us not forget that just a short while ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was an issue with the then Attorney General, John Jeremy of Senior Counsel now, and the former Director of Public Prosecution, Mr. Justice Jeffrey Henderson, and the issues surrounding the back and forth and the to and fro with those two individuals. So the PNM's ability and propensity to interfere with independent institutions is not foreign to us at all. And now you have the Prime Minister of this country, when faced with an issue coming out from that office, has the most contemptuous things to say about the DPP in terms of these issues as it pertains to staff shortages. And at that meeting that he had in Barataria, where he told persons that we have to live with less, that most persons within this country who are living with less have to adjust it. Let me tell Trinidad and Tobago squarely this morning. When we in the United National Congress speak about systematic dismantling of security apparatus, we speak about it in a holistic way. We understand the role that a lot of officials within this country play in the smooth running and administration of justice within Trinidad and Tobago. The DPP's office plays a critical role in the fight against crime. To break it down in its most simplistic form, a person commits an offense. The offense has to be investigated by the TTPS. Based upon evidence that is gathered, the person may very well be charged, and then the person must be prosecuted for them to be sent to prison, or to be fined, or to be jailed, or whatever the case may be. For that process to be smooth, for that process to take place, all the different cogs within that wheel, all the different parts, limbs of that particular apparatus must be working smoothly. And at any point in time, when the criminal elements believe that any aspect of that apparatus is not working as it is supposed to be, you will have an emboldened criminal element that will continue to go there and commit crimes. Because it is either they will believe that they will not be caught because the detection rate in this country is abysmally low, or even if they are caught, that the prosecution or the prosecutorial arm of the state is not working effectively and efficiently enough to properly prosecute them, so that their matters will continue to be called constantly within the courts of this country, and there will be no prosecution, no justice to be served upon these individuals for the heinous crimes that they commit. That is the problem that Trinidad and Tobago is facing in short with our criminal justice system. So when you have stakeholders within the system, the DPP no less, indicating to the Prime Minister and the PNM administration, the government of this country, that we are not properly well resourced, that there are chronic staff shortages within the DPP's office and they need to be filled, what you would expect from a reasonable, sensible, sober Prime Minister is an individual who would come out and say, well, listen, I hear you. We need to consult, we need to sit down, we need to figure out, and we need to resource your office. That is what we need to hear from the Prime Minister. That is what we need to hear from the Honorable Attorney General. What we don't need to hear is issues related to a building on Park Street, which has been empty for the past 3 years and has racked up a bill, an enormous bill of $40-something million. And then some degree of blame now being tethered to the DPP's office with respect to not inhabiting that building. And then the Attorney General, who is responsible for the administration of justice within this country, instead of coming as a mediator to treat with this issue with the DPP, is backing up the Prime Minister and calling shame on the DPP's office. So much so that the attorneys who work within the DPP's office, the prosecutors who face criminals day in and day out in this country, felt so much anger by that statement that they wrote a letter that they delivered to the Attorney General yesterday, indicating that they wanted him to apologize. This issue with respect to not consulting with the DPP, or not consulting with members of the security apparatus within this country, is not something new. We've been faced with this before. The building in Park Street that has been rented and tenanted and has not been occupied is not the only building that they've foisted upon the DPP's office without proper consultation, and it remains empty. Take your minds back to 2018 when a UNC opposition, responsible opposition, called upon the government to properly resource the DPP's office. We were told by the former Attorney General that there was some lease that would have been entered into with respect to Gulf City as well too. And the very first question that Senator Mark asked Faris Al-Rawi within the Senate was whether or not the DPP would have been consulted, that placing a high security functioning prosecutorial arm of the state within something as public as a mall, whether or not the DPP would have been consulted to ensure that proper systems and safe systems of work would have been put in place to ensure the safety and security of the prosecutors, the papers, the documents, the witnesses that would be traversing that office. And up to this day, some 4 or 5 years onwards, that Gulf City Mall situation remains the same. That there are no prosecutors working out of Gulf City Mall, that the DPP's office has not been shifted there, that they still remain with these chronic staff shortages that the DPP himself spoke about. So this is not something new that we are facing. This government loves to do things without proper consultation. They think that they know what is best for the people of this country at every turn of the dial, even if the persons who are locked within the system are telling them something totally different. That is not good governance. The hallmark of a true leader is an individual's ability to listen first and then lead. And that is not what is being demonstrated by the Prime Minister and the Attorney General in this particular situation. So what we are left with is a loss in public confidence in a significant arm of the state that has to be utilized to ensure that persons within this country are kept safe. That criminal elements that operate within this country, when they are caught, that they are properly prosecuted. A loss in public confidence. that persons were moved to anger yesterday to deliver that letter to the Honorable Attorney General, indicating to him categorically and pellucidly that they wanted an apology. That they are the ones locked in the system. That they are the ones who have to interface with criminal elements within this country. That they are the ones who are being threatened. That they are the ones whose family lives and personal lives and mental health have been destroyed by working in that office with the limited resources that they do in fact have. And that when they call upon the government to fix a particular situation, that they are faced with contempt and disrespect. Once you don't agree with the PNM, that is what is being meted out to you. And we have a significant problem with that within the UNC. That the issue with respect to that building is specific to their safety and security. They are telling you that special branch, no less, would have indicated to them that the building is not safe. Let us not forget that a senior prosecutor within this country was gunned down. So their safety concerns cannot fall on deaf ears. Dana Sitahal was murdered. She was a prosecutor. Her death must count for something. And the responses that you have given as the Prime Minister of this country fall woefully short as it pertains to treating with that issue. We need to get serious. And as a responsible opposition, we call upon the Prime Minister and the Attorney General of this country to fix and address those issues with respect to resourcing the DPP's office and all other aspects of the criminal justice system that are calling out for resources. Treat with them. Do away with your propensity to interfere and intermingle and disrespect and turn a new leaf. Subsequent to consultation, resource. Get it working. Because while you continue to fiddle, as we constantly like to say, Trinidad and Tobago unfortunately continues to burn. And now you have the persons again who are locked within the system calling out for you to do the correct thing. So from today, start with the apology first to the prosecutors, and then from tomorrow, resource them accordingly. That is all we want to hear from you as a responsible Prime Minister and a responsible Attorney General. Because if you do not, then we will see a repeat of the murder rate that we had last year and even a higher murder rate. If you do not, we will see more crime and criminality plaguing and scourging Trinidad and Tobago. If you do not and you do nothing and you continue to be discourteous to the people who need you to assist them, then we are going nowhere within Trinidad and Tobago. We're spinning top in mud. And the people who will be suffering based upon that are the same citizens of this country that you have been tasked with to lead. Listen first, lead after. I thank you. I will now pass it over to MP Haynes, who will deal with school violence.
Thank you, Sean. Good morning once again, Trinidad and Tobago. Today, as we begin this press conference, as we continue this press conference, we are yet again faced with videos online showing extreme levels of violence in our schools. We have seen in recent times that TTPS has had to be deployed into our school system because of the high levels of violence within our school system. This is not a new problem, but it has certainly become that much more escalated in recent times. As a country, we have to ask ourselves some very serious questions. On a recent platform contribution by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Education, both of them sought to deflect from themselves the responsibility for treating with school violence. The Prime Minister tried to say that is a question of families and the examples that the children are seeing. And the Minister of Education continues to be very derelict in her duty when it comes to treating with the issue of school violence. And so I want to put this issue very much in the minds of the population of Trinidad and Tobago, that since the physical reopening of schools, we have been plagued with this issue. Once the students were back out and the opposition, myself as Shadow Education Minister, many other members of the UNC opposition would have raised on several occasions that something needed to be done. In the first instance, we urged the Ministry of Education to put things in place to get ready for the physical reopening of school. Not just the physical infrastructure, not just desk, chairs, and schools, which they've been incapable of doing. So on the basic level, they've been incapable of getting ready for children being back out into physical schools. But we've also urged that they resource the school support services, that we look at guidance counselors in schools, and we look at the curriculum, because the children coming back into the school system would have also had all of the difficulties of the COVID-19 pandemic. They live in regular Trinidad and Tobago, a society that, if you look at any of our daily newspapers, has been plagued with violence at all levels. And how are we expecting young persons, children, to be immune to the state of Trinidad and Tobago, of the real Trinidad and Tobago society? It is inconceivable that the Ministry of Education continues to bury its head in the sand. And I want to take us through a very specific timeline from March 2022 till today. And I will show you very clearly how the ministry is not just a matter of a resource problem, as it is with the DPP, but it's a competence problem. That you continue to throw things at issues and you are not measuring the effectiveness, and the problem obtains till today. It has worsened over the past year, and you have no idea, no clue how to deal with it. And so on March 1st, 2022, we are now at March 16th, 2023. March 1st, 2022, we saw, same thing, videos of extreme violence in schools. That led to several press releases, conferences by the Ministry of Education. And at that time, their idea was to create an interministerial committee. That interministerial committee was supposed to come up with a plan and report to the cabinet. And from that, we were supposed to see results. That is March 1st, 2022. By April 28th, 2022, the Ministry of Education came to us and told us no longer will it be left to the principals, because school violence has escalated to such a level that we now need TTPS to take control of school violence, to take charge on school violence. I said then, and I said it again, I said it in 2022, that you are adding an additional responsibility to an overburdened and under-resourced TTPS, that you are not equipping anybody with the necessary skill set to treat with the causes of school violence. Mind you, they told us that the committee was meant to deal with the causes of school violence and not meant to be reactive, but the solutions that you saw coming out of it were all reactive solutions. And that we were told that the Ministry of Education would work with the TTPS, that they would work with tutor, they would work with the principals, and they will get a solution to the school violence problem. That is April 28th, 2022. By May 18th, 2022, we were told that the report is being completed and that they will report to the cabinet. Since then, from then to now, the Ministry of Education has been unable, incapable, just incompetently unable to report to us as the people of Trinidad and Tobago what they have done with this interministerial committee, what they've done with the data that they were supposedly collecting, how they have analyzed and assessed the situation, and how we are treating with the school violence issue. And so we see exactly what happens when you put incompetent people to solve very real problems. Because now, on March 16, 2023, we have, from the beginning of this year, in my own constituency, two out of two secondary schools in my constituency seeing record levels of violence. So much so that the TTPS had to be called in to curb about 11 fights in one day in one of these secondary schools. On March 3rd of 2023, the escalating violence and the complete inaction by the ministry prompted me to say, listen, enough is enough. Obviously, their interministerial committee is out of ideas, completely clueless, that they have nothing to report to the population, and that we've been proposing ideas from the beginning on how to solve this issue, or at the very least, de escalate the situation to some extent. So I would have written to the Minister of Education on March 3, 2023, citing these multiple incidents of school violence, citing the videos that we are seeing, and saying that it has become a serious concern and challenge facing our students on a daily basis. And in light of that situation, I proposed a meeting with the Minister of Education. So at the very least, that we can circumvent this back and forth via the press and the media and get to some real results. Because if you look at the government's track record, and I'll turn to the Hansard on a question raised by my colleague MP Rudy Indar Singh on violence in secondary schools and the measures to address. These questions were asked again in April 2022 and answered by the Minister in the Ministry of Education, MP Lisa Morris Julian. And on the specific question of a timeline to deal with escalating school violence and whether or not we can give the population some assurance that we are measuring the effectiveness of the things that they are suggesting. When asked for a timeline, the minister said very simply no. She's unable to give a timeline. And so here we are, March 2023, no timeline given, obviously no analysis of the effectiveness of the measures that they claimed to have put in place, and no results. If you saw those videos, if you've seen the videos being shared around from any of the secondary school fights that you are seeing, you have seen that it has worsened over time. That the violence has become so uncontrollable that there seems to be a lack of respect for anyone in authority. You are seeing teachers in the mix being thrown around, teachers on the floor, teachers leaving the school because they are unable to deal with the violence. Further to that, I am being told that one of the measures that the Minister of Education announced, which was the school safety officers, that the school safety officers who are contracted position, that in an answer to my colleague Senator Jerlene John in the Senate, that these school safety officers were supposed to work with the TTPS as a measure to prevent these fights from happening. That their contracts ended earlier this year with no word as to whether or not these contracts would be renewed. So the ministry again would need to tell us, is it that you've evaluated the usefulness and you've dropped this measure, or you are including a new measure? I mean, the silence from the ministry has become deafening. At this point in time, having seen what I have seen and wondering where the two ministers of education are, you've left to wonder whether or not they are just not up to the task. That if you can tell me that in these 3 years of holding the position of Minister of Education, one of those years there was no physical school. You had to deal with the pandemic, you had to deal with the reopening of school. And since students have been back out to school, you've seen this escalating violence. And on not one level have you been able to get a grip on any issue facing the education sector. Not school violence, not the examination pass rates, not the performance of our students, not issues facing the teachers. Not on any of these issues have you been able to give any key deliverable. Then that must mean that there is a competence and management problem at the very top. And if indeed that you are putting measures in place to pacify a very fed up public, that tomorrow we'll hear about school security officers, or we'll hear about another interministerial committee. We are quite simply very fed up of these things. Very fed up. They spoke in 2022 about dealing with the punitive and supportive measures, so that when on several occasions in a private member's motion brought by myself in the House of Representatives, via questions in the Parliament, via press releases and media statements, and now via a letter to the Ministry of Education, proposing very serious and important changes to our curriculum to deal with present-day challenges that students are facing, where we can look at things like anger management, conflict resolution, even things like gender studies so that you understand how to engage with your peers in a very real way at this point in time, where you tailor the curriculum to face the problems facing the students today and not continue to bury our heads in the sand and act as if we don't understand what is going on. And I can tell you, if we hear one more thing about another committee to study the causes, one more study commission to figure out why this is happening, you are showing your cluelessness. You are showing your incompetence. We have insisted upon proper data collection. If by now you do not know what the cause is, then the cause is you. If by now you are still looking around for what the problem is the management at the very top. And I say to the Prime Minister and to the Minister of Education, when you are treating with issues facing the next generation of Trinidad and Tobago, leave it out of your platform, people. Leave it out of your platform politics unless you are bringing solutions to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We are absolutely fed up of excuses. We are absolutely exhausted by your constant need to shift the blame away from yourselves. You have an elected responsibility. You are the executive of Trinidad and Tobago. You cannot tell us there is legislation you're looking at on another committee. Stop deflecting and do some work. What we are seeing is very scary. We are seeing a combination of decreased pass rates and increasing violence in our schools. We are seeing increasing violence society-wide, and it is now crossing that below 18 age range. And if they are not afraid of the police and their teachers under 18, well, I shudder to think what happens after. If you know your programs are not working and you know you are out of ideas, you know what you have to do. That job, you're simply not up to the job of running Trinidad and Tobago. And so I welcome any questions now.
We have a few questions. Mr. Sobers, given what you said, do you think that there is a deliberate attempt to underfund the office of the DPP by the state?
Well, what I know is that these issues that have been plaguing the DPP's office would have been raised not only by the DPP in prior press conferences or interviews, but it would have been raised at joint select committees. They would have been raised by the opposition in the parliament, outside the parliament, on the platform. The problems are not new. The mere fact is that the government has never dealt with those issues. As MP Haynes would have properly well indicated in her presentation just a short while ago, what happens is a constant deflection of the issues and no solutions being put in place. The government just has not treated with these issues that have been plaguing this particular office, which is essential and critical to the fight against crime and its part in the criminal justice system. They've just not resourced it. At this point in time, I think it may very well be a fair comment to make that they are just deliberately not doing it because they've never proffered to anyone the reasons for not resourcing the DPP's office in the manner in which that they should. These issues are not new. It's years we've been speaking about them. It's years the office has been speaking about them. So why haven't they been dealt with properly or frontally as they're supposed to? And for the government now to come to tell the population when faced with issues or these issues being rehashed by the same office that has been calling for these solutions to these problems, for the government to deflect again and now get into a very public spat with the office that is essential to the criminal justice system. Again, just demonstrates then that they are not fit to lead. They've not been listening, and now they've been deflecting. Now they're getting into a fight and a public spat with the Director of Public Prosecutions to demonstrate that they are not fit to lead this country. And the only people that are going to pay a heavy price for that is the public.
Mr. Sobers, a number of lawyers from the DPP office have written to the Attorney General asking him to apologize for his comments regarding the DPP. We know the AG met with the DPP yesterday. Do you think that the gist of that meeting should be made public?
Yes, I think in summary, what would have transpired between the DPP and the Attorney General should be made public. There has been statements that would have emanated from the Attorney General's office, from the Attorney General himself, in response to the issues that have been plaguing the DPP's office and the statements that would have been made by the Director of Public Prosecution himself. Based upon those statements from the Attorney General, the prosecutors who work within the DPP's office felt compelled to write a letter calling upon him to apologize. And within the contents of that letter, they indicated why they're in the position they're in and how that has been affecting them in a very negative and real way. If it is that problem is not arrested and the statement is a summary of what took place at that meeting isn't shared with the public and solutions are not proffered, then what you will continue to have is a loss of confidence in that office. And a loss of confidence in the office of the DPP will lead to a more emboldened criminal element. And as I said before, a more emboldened criminal element, the persons who will pay the price for that heavily, as they've done in the past couple of years, would be the public, and unfortunately would be paid in blood.
MP Haynes, this morning there's a video going viral online depicting a massive fight in East Forest Bay. Are you aware of the video?
Yes, I referenced the video.
Okay. The TTPS has suggested that there could be penalties for fights such as these. Do you have any comments on that?
We have seen over several of these fights that there have been the threat of penalties for the students who have run afoul of the law. And those things are all well established within our system. For me to comment on how the TTPS will do their work, I think, would be going well beyond my remit. I think where my focus lies and will always continue to lie is on what can the Ministry of Education do to prevent these things from getting to that point. Where can we look at the curriculum? Where can we look at targeted interventions within our school? At the end of the day, the students who are there between 8 and 2:30 p.m., they have already crossed the barrier that a lot of persons are facing since coming back out of the pandemic, even with facing high cost of living. That some of our students, some of our young persons under the age of 18 are unable to even get into the schools. So that those who are there between 8 and 2:30 p.m., 3 p.m., let us use that time wisely. By all means, give them the access to the academics that you need, that you require to become functioning individuals in society. But let us also use the time where we can look at the curriculum and give them the skills that needed to manage within Trinidad and Tobago society. So I continue to urge the ministry, look at things like conflict resolution, look at things like anger management, and get to a space before you reach the TTPS. And if they had started doing things like that, we may not see the escalation of violence in society across the board, not just within the schools. We've also heard about the programs. They've been talking about tech work programs within schools for students who are unable to cope with the academic end of it, but still require some sort of skill set to become income earners and wage earners in the future. And while talking about that, they have also failed to bring in more tech work educators. So when those who are in the system leave, we have no one to replace them. So who's going to teach you woodwork and the mechanics and the electrical? Who's going to do it if you have no one? So what we are faced with, and that again, you're bringing in a very reactive measure to a space where you have an opportunity to be proactive. You have an opportunity, if you have the political will, to make a very real difference in the lives of these students, and they continue to fail them time and time again.
By your knowledge, is there any data the Ministry of Education is collecting that shows the sort of psychological impacts school violence is having on teachers or other members of staff and students, etc.?
By my knowledge, the Ministry of Education is in fact not collecting any data. And if they are collecting data, they aren't using it to formulate any policy, because that's just not what we have seen in the public domain. At the end of the day, the ministry has shown itself to be very incapable of the basics of data-driven policy. So from the simplest end of how many students return to school since the pandemic, they've been unable to answer that question. Unable to answer how many students have dropped out of the system. So to look at a study that deals with the psychological impact of teachers with respect to school violence, I feel like that has become well beyond the scope of this particular Ministry of Education. So I would venture to say very confidently, they have none of that.
Mr. Silvers, yesterday the Commissioner of Police addressed a breakfast meeting in Chabonas, and she alluded to the fact that a divine intervention is really needed now to stop the massive crime situation across Trinidad. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I mean, she's new into the job as Commissioner of Police. I mean, maybe a month or 2 months or something like that. Very early on in her tenure, she would have indicated that she intended, I think at a joint select committee, the first joint select committee that she attended, she indicated to the panelists there that her crime plan was aimed at reducing crime and the murder rate within this country by June or July of this year, which by many standards most persons thought was quite unrealistic. However, because she was new in the position, persons wished her well. But that comment that was made yesterday, that is plastered all over the dailies today, to my mind, it appears then that you've thrown in the towel. This country is a praying country, yes, we know that. But God helps those who help themselves. And we need somebody with a plan heading the TTPS with the proper resources from the government to truly tackle crime and criminality within this country. And just hoping that divine intervention only would save us from the very real criminals and gangsters that we have plaguing Trinidad and Tobago is woefully insufficient. And it can't be the solution only. We have so many temples and mosques and churches, and when you visit them on their days of prayer, you would hear them talking about crime within this country and bad economics and job losses and whatnot. They pray for that on a daily basis. I pray for it on a daily basis that things turn around. But at some point in time, you need persons to really put their shoulders to the wheel and actually get the job done. People to develop policy and implement it accordingly. And persons to have the will to actually make a change and a difference. What was uttered yesterday, in my opinion, does not give me or instill in me any confidence then that this particular individual is capable of doing it. Clearly, the government is not minded to resource the GTPS. We've been calling for them to do so since they've taken office. And I think what we would have heard yesterday is an admission that the person who actually maybe is in need of divine intervention and help to sort this issue out may very well be the Commissioner of Police herself.
And Haynes, on another issue, you attended the RIC meeting yesterday in Chabonas. There have been accusations this morning that opposition MPs showed up at the meeting to disrupt the meeting. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Members of Parliament, the persons who showed up are members of the House of Representatives. We have a duty, an elected duty, to represent the persons who put us into office. Whether or not you voted for members, that is your representative voice. And in order to truly represent persons, you have to hear the voices of these persons. You attend these consultations. There was absolutely no desire to be disruptive at all. As a matter of fact, several of my colleagues and I met with Ms. Dawn Callender after to air out what is required. At the end of the day, you are dealing with a bread and butter issue. You are faced with the prospect of increased electrical rates in a time where service delivery has been poor, where the cost of living has been high, where there has been gross disrespect from the executive to public servants and workers alike, where you are being told, listen, take what you get and like it. And so if your wages are unable to meet with your current cost of living, and then you are going out into a public consultation and telling people, look, we're going to add something to that, and then expect them to be very quiet and meekly come in and say, well, maybe not. But then you have very wrong expectations. And so to then put that now on members of parliament, who none of whom I saw as being disruptive, and the videos will clearly show that there were no members of parliament with any intention of being disruptive. I think, it takes away from the real space of the concerns of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. As a matter of fact, the very opening of that consultation it started off with the height of arrogance and disrespect, with one of the panelists suggesting that he grew up in Central and he didn't recognize anybody in the crowd. And I wanted to say, I just didn't intend to participate in the consultation, but I wanted to say, when you were growing up, I probably wasn't born, so it really isn't difficult to think that you would not have seen me in Central. And so to say that, to suggest that, it just shows you that they really did not go in with the intention for consultation, that they came there to give very prepared answers. And if you want to do that, just send a press release.
Yeah.
Those are all the questions we have.
Okay. Well, we would like to thank everyone for tuning in to our press conference. And I want to reiterate the point raised by Mr. Sobers and myself, that at the end of the day, what is facing Trinidad and Tobago is incompetence at the very top. If all of our institutions continue to grapple with inefficiencies, grapple with resource problems, grapple with management problems, then you have to find what is the common denomination. What is the common factor amongst all of these things? And that is failure at the top, failure at the executive. And so until we get that right, we are not going to be able to fix any of these problems. And so thank you for tuning in, and you will join us on Sunday for our weekly press briefing on Sunday morning. Thank you very much.